Hello and welcome to this session. This is about focus on Tableau Prep, the who, the what, the why, the when, and the how within Tableau Prep. Today we have 4 speakers with us. We have Carl Alchin, who's talking about why Tableau Prep, Jenny Martin, who's going to be doing a click-only demo for us, and we have Tom Prowse, who's going to be doing a showcase of both Prep and Alteryx. And finally, Anya will be talking about dev within Tableau Prep. So let me just stop sharing my screen so we can see everyone's lovely faces. Give us all a wave, everyone. So yeah, I think we're just ready to kick off with the talks. If there is any questions on YouTube, please do drop them in the chat and I will get them to our panelists for you as soon as we have a break for questions, which will be at the end of every session. So Carl, are you ready?
I am. Yeah, thank you for joining us.
No worries. Feel free to start sharing whenever you are ready.
All right. Hi everyone. So we wanted to kind of kick off this session going fully end to end with Tableau Prep. So we didn't just kind of want to do just really a whole load of technical stuff. We wanted to kind of go and take the why Tableau Prep and then go and build that logic throughout. So you'll see with Jenny's basic demo, it's looking at all of the rich functionality that you actually have within Prep, making it easy. Tom's going to go and compare it to some more of the kind of more established tools that are actually out there. And then Anya's just going to kind of blow our minds with some of the coding at the end. But where we wanted to start off was just to really go and cement, why do we actually want to even talk about Tableau Prep? Obviously, you care a little bit. You're actually here watching, but we just kind of wanted to get stuck into that. So that's what we're going to do today. So let me share my screen and I will duck out my emails quickly and get into PowerPoint, and then we'll kick on from there. So yeah, what I'm going to go through specifically is who is really Prep designed for, and also why I personally think it's actually going to be part of this next data revolution. And I'll get into a bit more details as we go through that. PowerPoint's behaving for me nicely. There we go. So the agenda, yeah, what is Tableau Prep? I will go back and kind of describe that. So if you're brand new, if you've been using maybe Tableau Desktop or Tableau Server, I will take you through what actually is involved within Prep, how that fits into this kind of idea of self-service data preparation. That is that kind of next opportunity for us. But also why use Tableau Prep? And I'm not that biased. I say I'm a little bit biased, but we'll also talk about why not Tableau Prep as well. So I don't just want to give you all of the reasons for, I want to articulate why not. And while we're thinking about that, we also want to think about the who should be using Tableau Prep, but also who isn't Prep perfect for, and just really kind of raising that idea before we kind of dive too deep into the actual functionality of the tool. And that's where Jenny, Tom, and Anya will really kick on. So let's get stuck into some of the content. So who am I? Not the quokka. This is my book I've just released, which O'Reilly gracefully let me decide what animal I'd like to put on the front of it, which they don't normally do. So I'm very lucky. I lived in Perth in Western Australia for a while. So yes, it's not a vole, it's not a mouse, it's not a rat. Somebody described it as a platypus the other day, which I'm slightly worried about. So maybe I shouldn't just be teaching Tableau Prep, we should be teaching about animals in the natural world. But I have just released a book on this subject that will go and take you through lots of the content that you'll see today, but obviously in a lot more detail as well. Because my everyday day job is actually teaching on all things Tableau. So not just Tableau Prep, but desktop and a little bit of server occasionally too. But really my background probably mirrors lots of yours. I've been managing and working in BI teams for a number of years. And then I actually went and joined the information lab to be one of the consultants. I'm lucky enough to now be able to class myself as one of the Tableau Zen Masters after being one of the social ambassadors for a number of years. And all of that bubbled up into as this product called Tableau Prep came to the market and started to show really what it was able to do, that I got involved helping others go and learn Tableau Prep. And then we kind of threw that out to the wider community through something called Prep and Data, which we'll mention a little bit later on. But what fundamentally is Tableau Prep before we get into kind of huge amounts of detail about other things? Well, Tableau Prep is actually 2 tools. Often you'll hear it just referred to as one, kind of almost like Tableau. We mean Tableau Desktop most of the time when we talk about that, although Tableau Server used to be forgotten quite a lot. in the same way that kind of prep gets forgotten sometimes when we just use the term Tableau now. But prep, like I say, is two separate tools. There's Tableau Prep Builder, something that sits locally on your computer, very much like Tableau Desktop. I'm going to go and actually build the workflows in that place, in that tool. I'm going to go and connect some data, just like I would within Desktop, and work that all the way through to where I've got my output. It's just my output in Prep Builder sensors is actually a data set that's ready for analysis rather than that finalized visualization. Tableau Prep Conductor is something that helps me go and use Tableau Prep and take those use cases further forwards. It's actually part of the server. So within Tableau Server or Tableau Online, you can have the option to go and add the data management add-on. And that data management add-on will partly give you Tableau Prep Conductor. It also gives you the catalog with a whole lot of rich functionality within there. But Conductor allows us to go and schedule our workflows. So not only do we build this workflow once, but we can reuse it using Tableau Prep Conductor. We can also go and see errors as those runs occur within Prep Conductor. We can change the permissioning of what we have the ability to do. So it's actually a really rich tool. And when we use the term data management add-on, it doesn't really do Prep Conductor justice. Also, we're going to have to go and factor in a little bit down the line of prep web authoring that was announced at the conference. We won't dig into that a huge amount today, but that will kind of play into this. Exactly how that's licensed has yet to be revealed. And we'll find that out as we go through as to whether it sits more on the Tableau Prep Builder side, it's just actually in the browser, or does it form more part of Prep Conductor? The tool is actually quite young itself. It was really released on April 2018. It's been in beta and alphas for a while longer than that, but it was a tool that kind of burst onto the scene and keeps bursting onto the scene because its release schedule is actually every month compared to every quarter that we normally see through Tableau Desktop and Tableau Server. But really the aim of the tool is to go and take quite a lot of that manual manipulation of data that we do every single day to prepare our data sets for analysis. Whether that's connecting to files or databases or other sources, that kind of repetitive cleaning is actually kind of not time well spent. Prep is looking to go and remove that task and actually just go and build that logical flow once and then be able to kind of just press play and then everything else magically happens for us. The nice thing about Tableau Prep is it's taken Tableau's real kind of user-centric focus, data visualization skills, and capabilities and applied that to this data preparation task. And that's why Prep is really uniquely positioned to be able to do this well. And that kind of creates this concept of self-service data preparation. Tom will go and compare Prep to Alteryx later, which in many eyes was the tool that really lowered the barrier of entry into data preparation for a number of people, where previously it was always thought of a job that you'd have to push to IT or somebody with more coding skills. Where Alteryx's drag and drop capability allowed people to start working with their data and preparing it, either cleaning or reshaping that data. Where what we've found with Tableau Prep is that's lowered that barrier to entry even further. I won't go into much more detail for that because I'll kill Tom's presentation and he'll rightly hate me for that. But what I want to do is just kind of set that scene that Tableau Prep has really opened the door to a lot of people being able to take on this task of data preparation. And that's really important because data is everywhere. It's all around us. Everything that we kind of touch, every moment that we move, it seems, in the modern world, data is being captured about what we do and what we don't do. And also that data is not ready for analysis. It's messy. To be able to go and take and make use of that data asset, we need to be able to go and work with it and start to go and clean it up. And that's really where Prep steps in. But as I mentioned, previously those tasks have mostly sat in a centralized function away from me as the analyst being able to do this stuff. So having that ability to be the subject matter expert, and just in the way that Tableau gave us the power of Tableau Desktop, which allowed me to go and start to go and ask and answer my own questions, but through a visualized form, I can now do that with data preparation. That's stretching my capabilities a lot further than I ever thought was going to be really possible as a history and politics student, because the world of coding sometimes sits beyond me. Yes, I code in SQL. That was a task and skill I learned further down the way. But actually, there's many people who sit in that place, but they can't SQL code, or they don't have the ability to use R or Python or something else to prepare their data. So Tableau Prep in a drag and drop way, in a very visual way, has allowed us to really get access to that task for the first time. And ultimately it comes down to allowing me to answer and ask more questions and get those answers faster and faster. That's a powerful combination. So why use Tableau Prep? Well, as much as an opportunity is in the self-service data preparation space, well, actually it's purposely built for that. That's what Tableau sought to go and build. They'd already honestly nailed the visualization part of the process, opened the door to a whole load of people who wouldn't have the ability to go and use their subject matter expertise alongside the data skills, which maybe they'd struggled with before or just not had that experience, to go and find the answers to their questions. But Tableau Prep has kind of really been built on the fact that people do need to go and access more data, and centralized teams are getting squeezed for resource. So actually having that ability to go and start working with that data set yourself is a huge opportunity. But doing that in a kind of code-free or code-light way, I class it Tableau Prep more as code-light because we still have calculations. Almost feels code-free if you've used Tableau Desktop for years and got used to those calculated fields. That familiarization actually kind of makes it feel like a safe space to go and work with data where you just kind of feel comfortable already. You'll see from the screenshot that I've included here from Tableau Prep, from the profile pane, which you're using a clean step and a number of the other transformational steps, you'll see this profile of the data that Tableau is actually giving you. And this is a subtle little visual clues as to what's actually going on with my data set. Where previously we haven't really thought about that as a task that needs to be completed or needs to be understood, because obviously we know about our data. Well, as more data sets arise, that's not really the case. So having that ability to go and take visual elements, and as I'm going and connecting and working with a data set for the first time, seeing what's actually happening because of it, makes life a lot more powerful for me. And that means that I can go and iterate and work with my data much faster than I would have been able to. There's very rarely one right answer in the data space for us. So having that chance to iterate is really important. And that development cycle, being able for me to do both elements means I don't have to wait months for my other colleagues to respond to my requests. So that's why we should use Tableau Prep, but why might we not use Tableau Prep? Well, it is still a skill set. It's still a skill that needs to be learned. You're not magically going to pick up Tableau Prep and go, da-da, now I can just control all of my data. There's many nuances and skills, just like there are with visualizing data within desktop, to be able to go and learn how to go and connect to different data sources. When should I sample? When shouldn't I sample? Why should I remove data fields? Why shouldn't I remove data fields? Actually, is the data better wider or is it better longer? So how do I pivot? Should I go and join other data sets together, or do I now wait for those joins and those bonds of the different data sources together into one to happen in Tableau Desktop in the relationship model? It's a skill set that needs to be worked at and practiced. It's another reason why we've created Prep and Data, to allow you to have the chance to do that. But that skill set, you can't really let somebody just run with it straight away. They're going to need a little bit of guidance. That guidance is just a lot less than it's ever been before in Tableau Prep. So there's going to need to be some resourcing and kind of support that's needed there. It's just not as much as there ever has been before. The proliferation of data also means that you might be a little bit nervous, or find your IT teams being a little bit nervous around, you're going to go and produce more data sets. We're already swimming in data sets. Why do we need to have to go and manage more of these things? Well, part and parcel of life, as I've mentioned at the moment, new data sets are coming in from everywhere. But it's the management of the outputs of the prep flow. It's an important thing to do. People often speak about that kind of golden source of the truth. I don't personally believe they exist in many places. It's very rare to be able to go and create that, because the context that that data set is taken from and the way that it's actually been built inherently introduces some biases and twists on that data. So having that kind of clean data set that everybody can go to is really useful. It's just very difficult to get there. So prepping is inevitably going and creating more cuts of data than you've ever had before. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It's just a reason why you might not want to jump in with both feet into Tableau Prep. And also, I mentioned earlier that it's a new tool. You'll hear more from Tom about this later, I'm sure. But Prep is still building lots of those functionality or functions that you actually might want to use further down the line and in the future. I'll mention a couple more in a minute when we look at who might want to actually use Prep going forwards. But it's those elements that actually most of the tool is there. but you will find a few occasional times where prep is actually missing that odd function that you might need to use. Just know that it's coming, raise it on the ideas forum in the community posts, but it's trying to bump up that idea that actually it will do most of what you need to do today, sure, but it is frustrating where there's still some elements within Tableau Prep that you want to be there that aren't at the moment. I get that. Don't worry, I'm asking for those things as well. I want to play as much as anybody else does. So let's have a look at who in your organization should be using Prep, because maybe you already are, and that's fantastic. But I've not seen any organization take full advantage of actually using Tableau Prep. And I think there's a few key roles who really should be using and taking advantage of the tool at the moment that comes as part of the Tableau Creator license. So we've always had access to desktop and normally server or online as part of that Creator license. Prep actually comes as part of that, sorry. So having that chance to go and work with that is there for a number of people, just maybe they're not at the moment. So one of those people, as you can see on my screen, who absolutely should be using Tableau Prep in my eyes is this reporting analyst role. It's a role that I've taken on before, but it's also running teams of reporting analysts is a fun challenge. Lots of my team's time was taken up with the data preparation work. That's really tough to go and take on projects and know that you're delivering huge amounts of value. You're just going to go and take a vast swathe of that development time and just bury it into data preparation. Because even though we use the term reporting analyst or data analyst, not every analyst can use SQL or Python. Maybe they can even code in the language, they're just not given the permission to access those data sources due to the importance of them. That can be pretty frustrating. Prep opens that door and allows you to have more control around that, and also allows people who can't code that ability to go and interact with that data and apply their knowledge of what they want to see within their reporting, all of a sudden actually as a prepared data set. And if you're not fully 100% sure on your data preparation skills, there's a few brilliant catch-alls that are actually in there. The profile pane allows me to go and see the development, see how the distribution of data has changed. Even if I am an experienced user of data, as a reporting analyst would be, the profile pane goes and shows me when I'm going to go and connect to new data, what it actually looks like, what's included, what isn't included. A previous role, I had nearly 250,000 tables that I had access to in a database. Obviously, they're not beautifully documented all the way through. There's way too much proliferation of data to allow that to happen. But having that ability to go and view my data, see the profile of the data set, see how many records we have under each category, or seeing how clean that data is a really important part, and Prep uses that kind of visual nature of Tableau to surface that also within the join step as much as we actually have within the profile pane too. It helps to remove those errors. As I mentioned, Prep is a skill to learn, so having that opportunity to go and learn it and see the changes you're making, see that transformation you're making happen in front of you is really powerful. But also Prep makes the process easier to hand over. There's not many reporting analysts who will go and run that report for life. Often people are changing roles, we're having to go and pass work on to others more than we're ever having to before. So having that chance to go and hand over your work, ultimately productionalize your flow, is easier within Prep because you'll see the visual nature of Prep. You may have seen it on one of my slides earlier. But having that ability to build a flow, have that visually stored, easier to document now that groupings come out in 2020.3, but having that ability to go and pass a flow on to somebody else that is documented is much easier than having to go and walk them through the manipulations that you make within Excel, for example. Having to try and cover that off, and I've had numerous team members and I've had to take on numerous reports where that's the case. That's a really hard process to take somebody through. Taking that work and actually building it in a way that's easy to pass on is much nicer. Also, market researchers. I feel there's a really big opportunity for market researchers who they do have an absolute plethora of sources thrown at them every single day. Some of those sources are survey data. You never will get survey data in exactly the form you want, because actually sometimes you want survey data as an output to analyze in different formats. Therefore, Prep allows us to go and manipulate that really quickly, go and transform that data into the shape that we actually want it to make our analysis easier. But not all marketing is just about survey data. You're going to have feeds in from social media. You're going to have your web analytics coming in left, right, and center. You're going to get sent research by third parties. Being able to pull those data sources together and start to kind of stitch them together is where the value comes into lots of that data. Using them alone may answer a question or two, but actually combining those data sources is where the power is. Tableau Prep is brilliant at joining and uniting those data sets together, so we can go and work out the logic of how to tie it together, but also automate that process much easier as well. Again, that's kind of the idea of build once, run many times is a neat way to go. It's repeatable that way, but also that build process is, I've not worked with many data researchers where they've had deep knowledge of either coding languages or SQL or other data sources that they might actually have to work with. So having that drag and drop interface is a neat place for them to go as well. So yeah, market researchers, another group who definitely should be using Prep. Also business analysts, again, another group within your organization who will be working with lots of different data sources. By using Prep, it's becoming this one skill set for all of the data sources that you actually have to use as the business analyst works across different operational systems or in different parts of your organization. Also, as a business analyst works, they're going to want to flag up anomalies within the data set or where they're finding inefficiencies. Prep's profile pane starts to give a visual understanding of what that actually is. It makes that communication between stakeholder and analyst much easier than if they're having to output and visualize everything within either Tableau or another tool, first and foremost. So actually just kind of the way that business analysts can work actually changes if you have the power to be able to do that too. And also the iterative nature. Being able to preview from Tableau Prep is actually a really neat piece of functionality that can, again, make work happen faster than otherwise. So who isn't Prep perfect for? So if they're all the roles that I think kind of Prep should expand into, and there are more than that, but they're the main three, there's a couple of roles where I feel like Prep isn't bang on. The first one is spatial specialists. Prep at the moment has started to get spatial functions. It's developing that quickly. Even since I wrote this slide, we're getting changes within the tool, but we don't have many of the spatial functions that we'd want to work with, either joins or other elements within spatial data. The ability to see things on a map doesn't exist within Prep at the moment. Doing trade area analysis is just not possible. So if I'm working with huge amounts of spatial data, Prep isn't probably the place I'm going to go to be able to do that. And also predictive data science, unless you're really using the scripting tool to a stronger, the scripting step, sorry, to a stronger level, Prep isn't that perfect place to go and work with your predictive data science work. You might know R, you might use Python, that's fantastic within the scripting step, but we don't have those native functions within Prep at the moment. We don't have some of those kind of techniques around loops, for example. That's not possible to run in that way. So actually, it's not going to be the great place for predictive data science, but it will still help many people. So if you are looking to get started, there's three really great places. Just like Tableau Desktop, the Tableau videos and tableau.com/learn are a great place to go. I'm obviously going to plug my own book at this point because I also think it's a great place to go, getting lots of good feedback that really people wish they had this when they started using Prep if they're further down the line. Whereas people are starting to find the tool, they're starting to really understand how easy and effective it is as a tool to help them with their data preparation. And last but not least, you'll hear from Jenny and Tom later, but we run prepandData.com. It's the site that's got a weekly challenge where we're going and sharing use cases. So it's not just about talking about how great the tool is, it's letting people get hands-on with the tool in real world scenarios and situations to help them learn how to use data preparation to really empower their work. So at that point, I'll say thank you very much and hand over to Jenny shortly to go and talk about click-only solutions. But Lorna, I don't know if there were any questions that came through as we were chatting through there.
Thanks, Cal. So I think there was one question that came through, and that was, can this act as a replacement for any ETL tool?
Oh, any.
Any.
That's a big term. I wouldn't just say any, because I think, as I mentioned kind of in the talk, Prep is still building some of those functions that we'd love to see. So there are still a few things that if I was to say that Prep would replace any ETL tool, then no, absolutely wouldn't. Could it replace some ETL tools that are out there at the moment? Absolutely. And happy to take that conversation offline if people want to really dig into what they're doing with their ETL tools and whether Prep can really do that at the moment or not.
Do you see that happening in the future with the product life cycle of Prep?
I would love it if so. I think the guys and the team are on an amazing trajectory. So Raheem, Zahira, Meraki, and the team are developing a whole load of amazing functionality. Starting to see the spatial capabilities that were starting to get introduced at the conference, allowing people to use just the web editing function, web authoring function of Prep to open the door to more people being able to use the tool. I generally feel like it's moving absolutely in the right direction. And there's a lot of stuff that would, if I had it back in my team when I was running a team of 15 people, would have saved us hours and days and months of our work every year. So absolutely, it's a good tool. It's getting better and better. There are still some bits that we're missing though.
Okay, and there was another question that came in. Would you say this is suitable for auditors or financial services?
Yeah, definitely. So my background is in insurance and banking. Absolutely, I'd love this thing. So I used to run a SQL script every day to look at the liquidity at the bank I was working at. To be able to connect that up to SQL and run that logic through Prep, I would have 100% done that because it would have given me those visual clues as to what was going on. It wouldn't be me searching through the results off the back of that to really go and understand that suddenly a large amount of money had been taken out by a client out of a long-term notice account, etc. So yeah, seeing the data as you actually prepare it is a massive part of it. So much so I don't always visualize my data now. I know that sounds terrible. I don't have to use something in desktop every single time before I actually start learning. And I think that's a big part of Prep. So yeah, there's very much a home for both audit, for checking on what's going on within there, but wider financial services too.
There is another question, but I think this will be covered in Jenny's talk, but I'll ask it anyway, and you can
I was going to say, if it's a hard question, then definitely ask Jenny. I'm fine with that.
Would the output be hyperfiles or any type of data available for consumption, like putting it back into a database or a CSV output? So I think that leads us on quite nicely onto Jenny's one-click demonstration.
It's right? Both. It's both.
You just couldn't help but answer, could you, Carl?
No. You can read about it in the book. But anyway, over to you, Jenny.
Yeah. Whenever you're ready, Jenny, you just share your screen and off you go.
Yep, I will do that then. I'll turn that into a slideshow so that it's the full screen. Cool. So thank you for that, Carl. All about the, okay, no, don't want to do that. All about the kind of took us through a lot of those questions that Lorna was asking, like the what, the why of Tableau Prep. And I'll be covering a bit more of the how with a bit more of a hands-on demo of both Tableau Prep Builder and a little sneaky peek into Tableau Prep Conductor, because you may not have seen that before if you're a Prep user. As Carl mentioned, it is an add-on. So a bit about me. I am part of the 14th cohort at the data school, which means I've been using Prep for about 1.5 years now. And my best resource for learning Prep was definitely Prep and Data. Back when I wasn't helping to make the challenges, it was just going through the challenges and keeping up to date with all those releases. And then this year being able to actually be a part of the Prep and Data team and create the challenges, it's just a great way to sort of stay in touch with what's going on with the tool and exploring all the different functionality. So this talk's going to be about cleaning your data in a few clicks. It's really building on what Carl was saying about you don't have to use code, you don't have to use calculations. You can just get your data, see your data, clean it up, all with just the click of your mouse buttons. So let's take a look at the challenge that we're going to be using. So we're actually going to be using this week's Prep and Data. And that was released on Wednesday. We release the challenges every Wednesday, so you may have already seen it. And it's using Halloween data this week. So we've got Halloween costumes from around the world, and we've got their sales at different price levels. So, you know, before Halloween, they're sold at full price. The week after, they're sold at half price. And the week after that, they're sold at a quarter price. So that gives us lots of nice opportunity to clean up our data and get it in a usable format. So we have all the requirements listed here. It's easy to find this challenge online As I created the challenge, I won't be flicking back to the requirements. You'll just have to trust me that I'm doing the right things. So what we can see here is we can already see the sort of flow built. So it's not too long to take it from its input of about 8,000 rows all the way down to its output of only about 231 rows. So I'm just going to build the workflow again beneath it so that you can keep up with what steps I'm doing and how it's going. So if I just, from the connections pane on the left side, if you've not seen Prep before, this looks very much like Tableau Desktop when you open it, and you have the connections pane on the left-hand side. So I can just drag in my sales table from that connections pane, and it will create for us another input. We can see some metadata about our data that we're going to be working with today. So we've got just a few fields on costume, country, date, and a few on sales. So we'll step by step clean each of those fields for us today. So something that's really useful in the most recent Tableau Prep is that, okay, I've dragged my data onto my canvas. What do I do now? There's this nice little grayed out box that kind of shows you, okay, I can click here and I can view and clean my data, and that's where my data preparation can really start. And I think that that's, you know, just one of the great visual cues that we talk about in Tableau Prep. So if I kind of just zoom in on the profile pane, that's sort of all this section down here at the bottom. Then I have all of my field names and I've got some information about them. So where my mouse is hovering right now, I can see that I've got 44 unique values in my costume field. And I can see that up here, I've got the data type is a string. I've got some information about how many rows I've got at the moment and how many fields. And you can see the gray bars behind that Carl kind of mentioned. They kind of help us to see how our data is distributed. If we look at the date field, for example, it's a very uniform distribution. We've got the same number of rows for each date. And a good visual clue would be if one of those bars were a lot larger or a lot smaller, that would be a good place to start our investigation of our data. But luckily, it's all nice and clean already. It's all uniform. That's good. Whereas, you know, our costume and our country fields, they're a bit more less uniformly distributed, shall we say. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start cleaning up our costume field. Now you may notice that our costume field has some strange values in it. Because this data is coming from around the world, we have the costume names in a lot of different languages. So we're going to want to group those all together into the English words instead. And one of the great ways that we can do this is we can use Tableau Prep's group and replace functionality. Now, this is my favorite thing when I'm training new people in prep, just to see their faces, because they generally quite like the group and replace functionality. It looks quite cool. It's quite intuitive. And I hope that if you're new to Tableau Prep, this will impress you too. So we've got 4 different options in our ellipsis menu, our more options menu. We've got some manual selection, which if you're familiar with Tableau Desktop, you'll be familiar with that kind of grouping of, you know, just ticking boxes, dragging them into different groups. We've got pronunciation, which is English pronunciation. So that might help us with some languages that have similar spellings of the costumes. We've got common characters, which would be really great for this. These 2 values here, diable, spelt with EL, different ways around, because it just looks at the characters rather than their positioning in the word. And then we've also got spelling. So that's going to use an algorithm that looks at, you know, common characters, their positions, if you might have accidentally had a typo in there. So those are the 4 ones that we are just going to start playing around with, really. So if we try and do pronunciation, then we can click on that. We see the kind of movement of data along the top, if you like. And we can see that we've got some paper clips now appearing next to our values and some sort of visual animation of them moving into groups. So we can see our 44 values have gone down to 16 already. So our grouping is working. If we check on our cat costume, then we can see that we've got all the values of cat, gatto, cat with a K. So that's all grouping how we want it to, which is great. And you might be wondering, how does it know to name it cat? Why isn't it choosing gatto instead? That's just because the data set has a lot of English-speaking countries. So there are mainly the word cat in that group. So it will choose the sort of most frequently occurring value in that group to do that grouping. Now, we can also control the sensitivity. We can say, okay, make it kind of accept more values, be a bit less sensitive. So we've got Diable and Diabo here. And oh, look, there we go. They've grouped together now because I've increased that parameter there. And that's useful to sort of control that. I could check in to other ones. If there was groups where it was accepting values that I didn't want it to, I could easily just reduce the sensitivity again. But for now, I'm quite happy with that. I've got down to 13 values. I can see that there are still some values that I want to be grouped up, but I'll try a different type of grouping because I don't have to stick to just one. I can take that grouping and then go further with it. So if I now use the spelling, then we can see that hopefully it's going to group together a couple more. Yep, we can see that we've got our cat is now accepting the French spelling of cat as well. Brilliant. And from playing around with this many times, practicing the demo, I know that increasing the sensitivity of this won't actually help. So I've got a couple of outliers still remaining. I've got this Diable and this Gisht. I'm apologizing in advance for my terrible pronunciation. I tried not to. But to group those in, we can actually use the manual grouping without having to sort of hit done and then go in and group again. We can just go straight from here. So I have the tick box here. I'm on my devil group. I can just select the Diable and it will group up. And similarly, I can do that for Ghost as well. If I just give it a second to do that, and I can just find that Gisht value to bring it in. And then I will have my 9 English named costumes, which is exactly what I am looking for. One other cool thing that I can't help but show you as well is that if I knew next year I was going to change the name of my ghost costumes to be Phantom, I can just add that into my data set. And although we'll have a little red dot next to it to indicate that the value is not currently present in the data set, I know that going forwards it would dynamically be included in that grouping. So that's another great functionality of that grouping. So we have cleaned up one of our fields already. So that's our costume field, nice and clean. We can now go on to clean up our countries. So something cool that we can use within Tableau Prep is the recommendations. So you can see there's a little light bulb above the country here. So if I just click on that, then you can see that it's saying, hey, you've got a field called country. Why not make its data role a country? So that just means that when you then go into Tableau Desktop with this field, it will have the longitude and latitude generated with it. So that's a useful thing. I probably quite want that to happen. So let's hit apply on there. But okay, I've got some visual clues that something's not quite right here. I've got some red exclamation marks. And if I hover over there, it says value doesn't match in the data role. So I can see that I've got a few of those and they all seem to be slightly misspelt country names. But okay, I've still got a recommendation on my field for country. So let's see what Tableau Prep suggests. Okay, so it can use a grouping values functionality to look at its list of country names that it kind of knows there's only a finite number of countries, and it can match up those values to those slightly misspelt countries. And so if we apply that, then we'll see that we get the little paper clips appearing next to those countries instead of the exclamation marks, and now they're spelled correctly. So that's really cool. And Carl was mentioning that you can't see spatial data in Tableau Prep, which is true, but we can preview any step we like in Tableau Desktop. So it creates a sort of local temporary file just for us to have a quick look to see, hey, did that work? Did my country, changing it to a geographic data role, did that work? Yes, it did. And we can see, for example, Luxembourg, which was spelled incorrectly before, is definitely about where Luxembourg should be. So that's great. So now our country is nice and clean too. If we go ahead and take a look at our date field, then we can see something that jumps out at us is that it's a string at the moment. So if I hover over the data type here, it's a string. We know that we probably want a date to be a date data type, just because then we can use it so much more in Tableau Desktop, you know, with the date parts, date trunks, etc. and so forth. And we can see that our view in our profile pane has kind of changed here. It's kind of more aggregated the data. So we kind of have a better overview of it rather than the distinct value level. So we can see the majority of our data is in 2019. We've got some in 2020, some in 2018. Now, part of this challenge was to use one of the new functionalities in Tableau Prep, which is to use custom fiscal years. So this company who are selling these Halloween costumes, their fiscal year starts in November. So I can just go ahead and convert my dates into a custom fiscal year. And we're wanting to just bring back the year part there, the year number, and change that to be November of our fiscal year. It kind of gives us a brief example of what that's going to mean for our data. That's exactly what I want it to do. Great. So I'm going to convert those dates. And now we can see that that will just change to be 2018, 2019, and 2020. We're only actually interested in this challenge in this year and last year. So I'm just going to go ahead and exclude 2018 from our data set. So that is our date field, nice and cleaned up as well. We're now going to take a look at these sales. Now, if you remember, I was telling you that we either have our costumes sold at full price, half price, and quarter price. And that's all dependent on what date it is, so what week it's in. And so each row of data is only going to have its sales in one of these fields. Therefore, it seems quite wasteful to have all these null rows, null values coming through. So what we're going to want to do is reshape our data so we only have one sales column. So we're going to use a pivot step here. And one of my favorite things that I learned this year was about the wildcard search for pivoting. So I can just click that option, type in the word sales here, and it's going to pick up all of my columns that have the word sales in it, and it's going to perform that pivot for me. And that's dynamic going forward. So, you know, if there were any other types of sales columns coming through, they would automatically be included in that pivot. It's a cool piece of functionality, I think. But we're not done cleaning those sales fields yet. So if we take a look at our field, which was previously the headers, so it's called pivot one names now, then this has a lot of kind of repeated information in it, right? It's got the full title of sales at full price, whereas I could just have it saying full, half, and quarter and still get the same information from it. So how am I going to go about cleaning that up? I'm just going to zoom in so you can see again. If I go into these option menus again, I'm going to split and use an automatic split and see if Tableau Prep does what I hope it'll do by just bringing back what's kind of unique about each of those values. And it has. It's given me my full, half, and quarter for my price. I know I said it was click only, but we are allowed to rename our fields. So I promise I'm not cheating by doing that. So I just go ahead and rename that field. I remove this original row column because it's not useful to me anymore. And now I can go ahead and focus on the sales column that actually has the value and the currency within it. So first of all, I notice I've got quite a lot of null rows that I can now exclude just because of how we reshaped the data. It kind of made there be a lot of null rows that we can get rid of, which is very nice. And now we've got to sort of think about, okay, we've got our currency, a space, and then our sales value. So we could use that split again, couldn't we, that we just used? Only I have some bad news that Romania, the currency for Romania, if I just scroll down to it, it actually has two words and then a space. So we can't just use a simple split on the space and just take those two values either side, because then we'd have our new and Lu sales value in two different columns. So we'd still not have cleaned it up. It still wouldn't just be numbers in one and words in the other. So why don't we go ahead and first of all use the split off on the space and just take the last bit of that field, and that will give us basically just the numeric part. So if I do a custom split there, space on the last bit of the field, then I'll get my numeric sales in split off, which will be great. I'll just rename it to be sales, and then I will change it from a string into a whole number, just because that is what the challenge asks of us. So I change that into a whole number there, and you can see it comes into that aggregated view again. I'm not sure why I can't get rid of that. There we go. Aggregated view to help us see that, okay, some of our currencies have, you know, a very different sort of scale or range, but they're all in their own currency, so that's fine, nothing to worry about. Now we need to just work on trying to get this field to just have our currencies in. So we're going to use, in our more options again, we're going to use the cleaning functionality. And that's going to be useful to us because we can just remove the numbers and then we can remove the punctuation to get rid of the decimal point, and we'll be left just with our currency. So again, clever ways to sort of clean up our data without having to worry too much about writing any calculations. And there we go. If I just rename that field as well, then we have the currency. And now there is another step that is part of this challenge, but I'm going to leave it there so that I can go ahead and show you Tableau Prep Conductor just quickly. So even though we just built this, I'm going to get rid of this and add on an output step to the existing flow up here so that I can save it to many different locations. I can save it to files, which includes hypers, CSVs, TDEs. I can publish a data source straight to Tableau server, or I can even output to a database. So let me just sign in to our server and go ahead and just type in my credentials. So the one thing that I didn't do of the challenge that you could do if you wanted to is basically just pivoting the data so that we have a field for the 2019 fiscal year sales and a field for the 2020 fiscal year sales, so that you can just read across and combine year-on-year sales. Okay, I just need to select a project there, so I will just save it into the prep demo folder. And then rather than actually running this flow to publish this, I'm going to publish the whole workflow itself. So let me just find that prep demo field folder again, so that I can publish it to our Tableau server and show you what it looks like through Tableau Prep Conductor. So now you can see that we've got the same workflow that we just built here, looking exactly the same documentation, the same sort of coloring. So anyone who's looking at it here will see the exact same thing in Tableau Prep Builder. And not only can I choose to run it to create that output, but I can also schedule it. So I can select any kind of schedule that I want. Maybe I want it to go every weekday because I'm interested right now about those post-Halloween sales of my costumes. And I select it as a full refresh because I haven't set it up as an incremental, but that is a possibility too. I can create that task. And I can also say, okay, I do want it to run now, so that we can actually see that output as well. And you can see that the status went from never run to pending run. And if we give it a couple of seconds, I'll just show you the lineage that we have here. So we have that comes as part of the data management add-on 2. You've got your workflow, you've got the Excel that it's connecting to, and when the output appears here, you could see that too. So that helps you to go ahead and manage your outputs, as Carl was kind of alluding to, mentioning, and really make the most of it. And if I come back to here, then you can see that it succeeded. It successfully run. I have my output and it's in my lineage too. So if you want to go ahead and finish off this challenge, then it is Prep and Data 2020 week 44. And I please do encourage you to do so. There are also many other click-only challenges which you can find on our Prep and Data website if you're a beginner and want to start learning the functionality without having to deal with any calculator fields, then that's a great place to start too. So I will stop sharing my screen now. I will hand back to Lorna and ask if there are any questions.
Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate the talk. It was great to see a click-only demo. I definitely didn't think you could split on a text field and just have that like literally blew my mind. So thank you. I learned something new today as well. There's just a couple of questions that I don't think you quite touched on, but the can you output to a database as well?
You can, yep. You can input from a database, output to a database, all of that good stuff.
And what other outputs are there for Tableau Prep?
So you can publish it straight to server. You can publish it locally as a hyper, TDE, or a CSV.
Okay, perfect. And then one other question is can you connect to SharePoint files as well and make sure that it's refreshed when a file on SharePoint is refreshed?
I'm not sure about connecting to SharePoint from Tableau Prep at the moment. Carl, do you know?
Yes, the connection is tougher when you're actually saying when this job is completed. So I haven't connected Prep up to SharePoint yet, but you won't be able to say when this happens, then go and kick off this piece of work yet. those conversations are going on about how that lineage would actually go and kick off and actually happen. But I'll go with no, that's not possible at the moment, but there might be some neat workarounds with scripting and coding. So maybe one for Anya later, but in the Information Lab, we don't get to work with SharePoint very much. So the answer to that one's probably not from us right now, but somebody might come up with a clever solution.
Okay, thank you. And Jenny, could you just confirm what version you was using? Because I think like the output to database might have been a later version compared to an earlier one.
I was using 2020.3 for this demo. I believe the output to database came in maybe 1 or 2 versions before then. No.
There's also kind of 2020.3. With the fiscal years that Jenny was also using within there, that was also 2020.3. So yeah.
Okay, so it's definitely beneficial to try and keep up to date with the upgrades for those new features that are always coming out. Kate Brown said, fantastic session, Jenny.
Kate.
So, and I think this is more of a question for Carl, but Jenny, you can
keep them away.
you can try and answer this one. Do we have a public version of Prep?
No, we don't.
Is it coming out anytime soon?
Yeah, we hope so. We hope it will exist one day. It's something that I mentioned on every single talk I try to do. So thank you for whoever actually raised that as a point. Possibly it was Kate. So yes, one day we'll get hopefully a version of Prep Public, which obviously Prep with web authoring kind of gets us a little step towards that. But hopefully Adam and the team at Tableau kind of dig down the back of their sofa and think the funding is worth it to allow more people to work with self-service data preparation, which I fully do. I know the prepping team do. Lorna's nodding away, so she does. So let's all keep talking about it, and then hopefully Tableau will hear those cries.
And then last question is, does this work on AWS or Linux? I assume that's in reference to the Conductor. Not because Tableau Prep would just work on like Windows or Mac, right?
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So Prep Builder is Windows or Mac. With the data management add-on, that is purely wherever Tableau Server or Tableau Online works. So in that case, we can run Server on Linux. I haven't tried to use Prep Conductor on Linux yet, but I haven't heard anybody say that it doesn't work. So I'm going to go with the assumption if it's still the same tool, so it absolutely should. If I'm wrong by that, somebody please drop that into the chat because I'd love to know that too.
Okay, thank you both. Thanks, Jenny, for that click-only demo. It's always good to see that you can just use your mouse to get to clean data. So thank you very much. Next up, we have Tom Prowse, who is going to be walking through the Tableau Prep versus Alteryx. So I will let him give a bit more of an introduction into his own session. But over to you, Tom.
Perfect. Thank you, Lorna. So yeah, I've come to the prep session and I'm not going to talk completely about prep. So I don't know. Let me just share my screen. And yeah, so I'm going to talk about Tableau Prep versus Alteryx. So a lot of people are probably using Alteryx. So let's just see how Tableau Prep compares to it. So a little bit about me. I'm also part of the data school and started in DS14 along with Jenny. So that was April last year. So I've been using both of these tools for around 18 months now. Before I started, I had no data preparation knowledge. So all I was doing is going into Excel, manually updating, copy and pasting, dragging the little cells down and up, which I think a lot of people probably had that sort of kind of experience before getting involved in these types of tools, which have made my life so much easier. So a little bit about Alteryx. So Jenny's covered Tableau Prep. So Alteryx is a little bit older. So it's a bit more of an experienced kind of tool. So I think it was around 2006 when it was released. So it's got about 10 or 12 years kind of more experience in Tableau Prep. And you can tell that it's more of an advanced solution. So it's gone through the kind of the simple data prep tools, but then it's also built on that and you can have a more rounded and advanced solution. But fundamentally, both of the tools are quite similar. So you can both discover, prepare, and analyze your data and they both give you that visual representation of what's actually happening. So you don't have to go through loads of code and try and pick out like, okay, that line saying we're doing that, or like we're doing something here. Just makes it really user-friendly and really easy to use both tools really. So before I start with having a little demo and showing you both of the tools, I'm going to introduce the concept of climbing the data prep mountain. Now, don't worry, it's not an uphill struggle, so it's not that hard. But to start off with, it's fairly easy. You know, everyone can get involved. It's nice and flat. You don't need any kind of a specialist equipment, and you can just go on, I don't know, a Sunday afternoon stroll with your family. So everyone can get involved. Then it gets a bit harder. So as you get a bit steeper, you start to kind of, I don't know, maybe you need some more specialist equipment. So like we've got a walking stick there. So these types of tools help you along your way when you get to the harder problems. And then finally, when you get closer to the top, this is when you really need your trusted tools like the climbing equipment here. So, but this isn't for everyone. Not everyone's going to be scaling a mountain and doing all of the kind of harder tools. So let's split it up into 3 sections and think about it in a data prep way. So first of all, down at the bottom, we've got our kind of bread and butter of all of the data preparation tools. We've got filtering, we've got cleaning, and we've got combining data sets. Tableau Prep and Alteryx 100% can do this because that's kind of the main reason these are products. But then when we kind of go on to the next stage, we go into more advanced cleaning. We know that Tableau Prep can schedule, as Jenny just showed us, and then outputting to databases as well. This is where the two tools kind of split apart a bit, and Alteryx starts to show its more experience. So obviously Tableau Prep is only been going for kind of 2 years or so it's still quite a young product. It's getting to these advanced bits, and then this is where Alteryx starts pulling away. And the final step is where Alteryx really comes into his own. I know Carl's mentioned some of the spatial bits and the predictive analysis. This is where Alteryx is way ahead of Tableau Prep at the moment, at least. So this all depends on where you are within your data prep journey. So maybe you're just at the beginning, but you want to be able to get to the kind of the spatial analysis and the predictive at the end. Or maybe you don't even need to get to that point. Maybe you're at the complete opposite end and you're using your kind of data preparation tool to become a citizen data scientist, where the Alteryx is really key for this. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be one or the other and one's better than the other. I'm saying potentially you need both of them. So different users can use different tools. So Tableau Prep might be more focused on the user who's never used data prep before, whereas Alteryx has got your more kind of your super users, so who want to go into the deeper predictive analysis. So thank you for staying with me for there. Let's actually look at the products. So Jenny has already introduced Tableau Prep, so let me show you Alteryx. So when you open up Alteryx, this is the sort of view you get. You can see it's kind of similar to Tableau Prep, where you have this white canvas here. So this is where we're going to put all our tools and build our workflows. Down the bottom, we have a results pane, which is empty at the moment because we haven't got any tools. And then on the left, we've got our configuration pane. Now, along the top, this is where we make all our decisions about what goes into our workflow. As you can see, we've got lots of different tools and lots of different folders as well. So at the top, we've got inputs and outputs. Then we've got preparation, we've got filters, formulas. Then we've got joins, our unions, transformations, we've got how to shape our data and some summarizers. So there's a lot of tools. And for the first time you open Alteryx or a data prep tool, it could be quite overwhelming because you don't really know where to start and you almost get a bit lost, and it might even be off-putting for some users. So this is the first comparison I'm going to make between Alteryx and Tableau Prep. This is my personal opinion. I think Tableau Prep, for the person who's never used a data prep tool before, is a lot more intuitive and it's a lot kind of more user-friendly for that initial stages. But let's go ahead and input some data within Alteryx. So within the in the input and output tool, I have my input data. So let's drag that in to the workflow. Okay, so the configuration pane has now changed. If I press on the arrow, this opens up my data connections. So within this tab here on data sources, there's a massive list of different databases we can connect to. So everything from our SQL servers, Oracle, Amazon Redshift, Azure data warehouses, even Salesforce. So there's a lot of different options here. But for now, let me just connect to a file. And again, we have loads of options. So we've got our CSVs, we've got our Microsoft Excels, Access, the hyperfiles. So in good Tableau fashion, I am going to connect to Sample Superstore, which if anyone's used Tableau or Tableau Prep before, you're probably familiar with. So this is an Excel file. So from here, I can choose which sheet I bring through. So for now, I'm going to bring through my orders. So now I've brought through my orders. Nothing too much has changed. There's a bit more information down here. This looks like it's one of my data, but it seems quite squashed and kind of over to the left-hand side. And my results pane still has no data available. But if you notice here, it says use Control R to run the workflow. So this is another difference between Alteryx and Tableau Prep, is that after each time you want to run or make changes to Alteryx, you need to run your workflow, which can be done in the top right here with this blue button. If I press run, notice how it works through, and now I have all of my data about my orders in the results pane at the bottom. So I can scroll across, and it's just a data grid, so there's no kind of profile pane like in Tableau Prep, but I do have the green kind of bar here to say, okay, 100% of my records are okay, so there's no nulls or things like that. It's only partially shown 2,000 of my rows as well, compared to 9,000 in my total data set. So now I've got my orders. I want to find out how many of my orders have been returned. So again, I need to bring in another data set. Again, I'm going to choose my sample superstore. But instead of orders this time, I'm going to choose returns. Press OK, and press run again. Now I have my two input tools, my orders, and I've also got my returns. So I've got a column for returned, which is yes, and the order ID, which has been returned. Now I want to join these together, and then we're going to compare and see which the differences between Tableau Prep and Alteryx when you're joining things together. So this is the join tool, which I've just brought in from the top. Notice on the left-hand side, we've got a left and we've got a right anchor. So these are our input anchors. So I'm going to connect and drag from my orders to the left anchor, and the same to the right anchor from my returns field. So this is nice visual, and you can see where your data is coming from and where it's being input into the join. If I click onto the join, this is where I set up the condition which I want to join. So from my left, this is my orders. I want to choose order ID. Now it automatically shows I've got order ID in my right table, so I probably want to join on that. So now I've set up the join, let's run the workflow. So now on the right-hand side of the join tool, notice I've got three different anchors here. So I've got the left anchor, the right anchor, and then the J, which is the join. Now these three are visualized here. So the J is the traditional kind of normal inner join. So where my order ID from my orders table and returns table are equal, then they'll join. Whereas the left is an outer left join, and the right is an outer right join. So notice here I've got about 3,000 rows where my order ID matches on both tables. So if I scroll along to the right, I've got all of my products which have been returned, all of my orders which have been returned. Now, if I click on the left anchor, I've still got a lot of data here. So I've still got about 9,000 rows. So these are all my orders which haven't been returned. So they haven't been joined within my tool. Now, ideally, I want to keep all of my orders together. So I need to be able to kind of combine them back together into a single table. This is where I'm going to use the union. So I can drag in a union tool. Notice how it automatically connects to one of the anchors, depending on which one I've held it closest to. So this is connected to my J anchor. And then I'm going to drag from my left anchor into the same union tool. So we're going to union them both together. Again, I need to run my workflow for the changes to happen. And now at the end of my union, I now have some null values. These are all my orders which haven't been returned, as well as my orders which have been returned. So, okay, so that would be how we combined them in Alteryx. So let's go and do the same thing in Tableau Prep. So you can see here, I've already input my data into Tableau Prep. The blues here, we have the orders, and the oranges are all the returns. So again, the first step is to make a join. Now, there's a few different ways of doing this. I can use the normal plus and then choose join from the menu. But you can also drag tools on top of each other to combine them. So if I take my returns and drag it above my orders step, notice how we've got a union and a join. And when I hover over either of them, they change color. So if I hover and drop it onto the join, this automatically makes a join for me. And this is the join tool. Now, Tableau Prep makes this really easy and really simple to understand. So first of all, it already has predicted that I want to link order ID and order ID in both tables. And I can change that by pressing and clicking if I needed to, but we'll leave that for now. And then jumping down here, this is a little summary of the records which have been included. So notice I've got 800 from my returns, 800 from my orders, and there's a few duplicate rows. So we've got more than one order ID from each join. So we've actually exploded this to about 3,000 rows. But it also tells you what's been excluded. So we've got about 9,000, just over 9,000 rows, which have been excluded. And these are the rows which are the orders which haven't been returned. And then the final visual cue is to see these orders IDs here. So this is from my orders table. The order ID in red are the ones which haven't been joined, and then the ones in black are the ones that have been joined. So if you take this one here with 762 on the end, you can tell it's also available within the returns. Now, okay, this is great. So I can add a clean step after my join and scroll across to my profile pane. But this is now returning only my orders which have been returned. And there's no left or right anchor like with Alteryx. So how do I overcome this? Now, Tableau Prep also has the join type. So we've got an inner join. If you notice how I just zoom in, it changes color slightly when you're hovering over. So I've got a slightly darker gray when I go over the inner. And I also want to include all of my orders from the blue circle or from the orders table. So if I click on that, we've now created a left join, which included the orders table. And this visual here has changed. So now it's included. It's still showing the ones which haven't been joined, but it's all included in the same table now. So now if I click on my clean step, go across again, we've now got all of our returned, which are no if they haven't been returned, and yes if they have been returned. So this makes it really simple and really easy for the join to be in one step and to control your join a bit more compared to within Alteryx. Now, again, there's not a right way or wrong way. They're both getting the same results, but this is just how Tableau Prep makes it a little bit simpler for you and a bit more visual, and to actually see what's going on and have a little bit of control within a single tool. Now, I'm not saying there's a right way or wrong way. Obviously, there's benefits of having the 3 different outputs within Alteryx. But as a first-time user, I find this a lot more easy. So that's the kind of first step of the easy climbing the data mountain, should we say. Everyone can do this, give or take, with a little bit of training. So it's nice and easy. So let's move on to the second bit where it's getting a little bit harder. So there's been quite a lot of mention of exporting to a database. So let me show you that now. Or let me show you at least the functionality. So on here, we can add an output step. So if we click output, and then with the setup across here, we've got a few different options. So we can choose a file, and from the file, we've got our hyper or our CSVs. And again, we can do append, full refresh, incremental refresh, and things like that. We've also got a published data source. This publishes our data source as a data source to our Tableau server. And we've also got the database table here. So if we choose database table, and this gives us a list of all of our connections which we can connect to. So there's not as many as within the inputs, but there's still kind of the majority of the connections which people will use. So you've got your main ones there. All you need to do then is click on there, input your connection details, which I'm not going to do here, but and then you can have different options for overwriting tables, updating tables, appending tables, and writing new tables and things like that. So it has some new functionality within writing to databases, which is helping Tableau come along and get up the mountain to the harder bits. So let me jump back into Alteryx so we can compare the different things with databases. So Alteryx, you can use your output data in a similar way and connect to all of your different data sources. Again, I'm not going to do that because I'm just going to show you that. But there's also where Alteryx takes it a little bit further. We've got our in-database tools at the top here. So if I click on these, there's a set of tools here. If I just zoom in, and they kind of seem like they're similar to the normal tools we have. So we've got connect to database, we've got filter, formula, join, select, things like that. However, instead of Alteryx bringing all of the data and the workload onto your local machine, this pushes it back to the database. So it's pushing kind of the grunt work back to the database, and it's doing all of that work on the database before bringing it locally for you to work on your machine. So this is where using lots of kind of bigger data sets and resource intensive ones, that pushing it back to the database can be really useful for you when using Alteryx. Whereas Tableau Prep doesn't quite have that feature yet, but who knows in the future, because they keep kind of innovating quickly, it might come kind of available soon. Now, Carl mentioned when not to use Tableau Prep as kind of the spatial and the predictive analysis. So yeah, that doesn't quite have that yet, but let me show you in Alteryx how this really comes into its own with its really developed product. So I'm going to show you a quick spatial example. So in here, I've got every single bus stop and bus route from within London. So we've got route 1, we've got the run. So if it's a return route, so we've got, these are kind of opposites. We've got our sequence, we've got our bus stops, and then we've got our location as well. So let me just bring in a filter tool. So again, we're going to drag in, bring in the filter. We can set up our filter, and we only want to keep one of the runs. So we're going to equal 1. We're going to run, and notice how we've only got the one run now. We've got a true and a false anchor, so we can see the run of number 2, but let's just stick with number 1 at the moment. Now at the top here in our tool pane, we've got spatial. So we've got lots of spatial tools here. We've got everything from a distance, find nearest, spatial info, spatial match, and trade areas. And we've also got create points. So let me bring the create points in and connect it up to my filter. Now this is where we set up and create an individual point for each of our bus stops. So first of all, we're going to use location easting and northing. This is where you've got, depending on your coordinates, is you can use integers, floating points, but I'm actually going to use the projected floating points and then press on the 3 dots here to have a little bit more information. So this is where you can actually choose your coordinate system. So notice how we've got national grids. So if I press on the plus, you've got lots of different countries here. So I'm going to use the British national grid where we're actually going to put our points on. You can press OK, run our workflow. And this tool here with the binoculars is a browse tool. So after every spatial tool, you'll need to browse it in a way which then shows the map. So if I click here, we've now got a map with every single bus stop in London. So on every route, so if I click here, you notice how it turns pink. So if I click through, it's moving along the bus route, which is quite cool, to visualize every bus stop. We can take this into Tableau and put it onto a dashboard, fine. But maybe we actually want to see the sequence and the routes of the buses. So let's join all these points together into a line. So we've got the poly build. Bring this into a workflow. We can connect it up here. We've got a few different options at the top here. So we've got convex hull, polygon, or polyline. So if you're going to draw shapes, it would be the polygon, but this time we just want to draw a line. So we choose polyline. The centroid is the point that we've just created with the create points tool. Group fields, so we want a different line for each route. So we're going to choose route, and then sequence field, where you're going to use sequence because that's the order in which the bus goes through the different points. So again, I'm going to connect up to our browse tool and run. And now we should have every single bus route in London. It kind of looks like a lot of squiggly lines at the moment, but if I click here, notice how it highlights in the pinky red, and we can go through and visualize each individual bus route. And now that's a fairly simple spatial example, but it shows you the power of Ultrix and how easy you can, with what 3 or 4 tools, you can make really powerful kind of analysis with just lines of data, which is really, really easy. Now, as Carl's kind of mentioned, Tableau is working on this. So let's have a look at a couple features which were coming soon to Tableau Prep. These were released at or mentioned at the latest Tableau conference a few weeks ago. So we've got spatial calculations. So we can already do these in desktop. So this is your make point, make line, distance, and buffer. These are coming to Tableau Prep soon. We're not too sure when and what they're going to 100% look like, but we expect within the next year you'll be able to do some spatial calculations within Prep. And we've also got Einstein predictions. So when Salesforce acquired Tableau last year now, Salesforce have a product called Salesforce Einstein, and the discovery part of that product is all about predictions. So we're actually going to start bringing that into Tableau. So you'll be able to use it in Tableau Prep. So that gives you the prediction side of things. So you can see how Tableau is trying to come into the more advanced tool, similar to Ultrix. Obviously, it's a lot younger and it's going to get there slower or a lot quicker at this rate, but it's not going to be the full Ultrix product, but it is evolving all the time. So let's have a little recap because I feel like I've been talking for quite a while now. So I like to think of Tableau Prep as the new kid on the block, should we say. So it's got lots of innovative features, which Jenny's mentioned with the groupings and things like that. But then Ultrix is the more advanced tool at the moment. So just because it's been going for what, 10, 12 years longer than Tableau Prep, you'd expect it to be a lot more advanced. And there's lots more kind of things you can do. However, if you're a first-time user, I personally find Tableau Prep to be a lot more intuitive. So you bring in an input tool and it gives you the prompt on what to add first and things like that. It's just lots more kind of user-friendly features, I find. But then on the other hand, Ultrix has that broad range of functionality. So I think there's about 180 different tools, which if you know what you're doing in Ultrix, you can really get into deep kind of functionality and with lots of great analysis. So that kind of brings you on to what type of user are going to use both. So Ultrix can do all of the data cleaning and things like that, but it's going to be more for kind of power users, I think. So they want to go into the spatial, they want to go into predictive, and they want to go into more kind of advanced techniques. Whereas Tableau Prep's I've never needed data prep before. Like I probably need it now. This is the kind of the entry one, and it's going to get users who are kind of newer and don't have as much knowledge, and it's a lot easier to get started with. Now, as I mentioned at the start, where I'm going to go back to my climbing the mountain. Depending on where you are within your data journey, it's depending on what tool you're probably going to use. So if you're right at the advanced, you're probably going to want to use Ultrix because of the advanced functionality. But if you're right at the start, maybe Tableau Prep's a better option to get you started. And it depends where you want to get to as well. So if you want to get to the predictions, then maybe Ultrix is the better going forward. Or if you've got a mix of users, maybe both of them's best. So for maybe some users who don't need to do those predictions and those spatial analysis, then Tableau Prep. And the people who need to do that, then Ultrix. So it's just finding the right balance for you. And I don't have the right answer to which one's better and which one's right for you. So it really, really does depend. So thank you. That is everything. Let's go back to Lorna to see if we've got any questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. There is one question which is about how about performance? So which tool can handle the bigger data sets potentially, or are they both treated differently based on the size of the data?
Yeah, so Behind the scenes, I'm not 100% kind of clued up on this, but I think Alteryx kind of works row by row, whereas Tableau Prep brings this in as like a hyper extract. So the performance, Tableau Prep uses a lot of sampling behind to try and improve performance. But I think overall, Alteryx probably works with the really, really big data sets a lot more efficiently. Like I said, we've got the NDB tools. And yeah, sometimes with performance on Prep, we've had a few issues in the past, should we say, and they've got a lot better. But yeah, so it's probably Alteryx on if you're the bigger data sets, but they're both good at going through both of them.
Perfect. Like you said, though, Tableau Prep is still, what, 3 years old
exactly.
compared to Alteryx of being 10, was it? 10 years?
Yeah, 6? I think it was 2006, which was way before my data journey started. So probably have to go to Carl for that one.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Tom. Oh, Carl?
I was just saying, ouch for the comment on how long I've been working with data, but it's not far off.
Okay, so thanks anyway, Tom. There is no questions in the chat. There is one more. There's just one question that's just popped in. Can it connect to the same set of data sources as Tableau Desktop? I assume that's on about Tableau Prep.
Yes, most of them, I think. I'm not 100% sure on if it's got all of them, but it's got the majority of them, all the main ones at least. Okay,
cool. Thank you very much. Thanks for the talk, Tom. We have one last talk today. We are going to be running over ever so slightly. But Anya is going to take us through some data dev side of things of Tableau Prep. So do stay tuned for us, please, and ask any questions in the chat. Anya, are you ready?
Yep.
Over to you.
Thank you for laying the really nice ground, Carl, Jenny, and Tom. So I'm going to talk about more of a developing side of things, as Lorna mentioned. And my talk is going to be about how to connect to APIs in Tableau Prep using the script step and Python. So just to introduce myself, my name is Anya Prasvetova. I'm also part of the data school, and I joined the data school a year ago. And I'm also Tableau Data Dev Ambassador, which was announced in August this year. So I'm going to look at more of a codey side of things. What can you do in Tableau Prep with the code? So I'm sure that you're very excited now after all these talks about how you can use Tableau Prep in your data preparation journey, how it can simplify and really automate a lot of things. But some things are still not there in Tableau Prep. And for example, you can't connect to APIs directly using Tableau Prep. So to do that, we are going to look at how to use Python and the script step, which extends the functionality of Tableau Prep. But first, before we start looking at the code side, let's think about what are APIs. And I'm sure that some of you know, but I wanted to remind or refresh, or maybe just introduce you to the world of APIs. So what is an API? And API is a software that allows one piece of software to talk to another one. So imagine you have a web browser app or an app on your phone, and you want to send a request from one of these apps. So you send a request, which is usually coming in the shape of get some data, post, meaning add some data to the existing data set, put something, or delete some data. And so you send this request, and it goes by the API based on the documentation of the API and following the rules of a certain API. So you need to understand how to form this request based on the documentation. And then that goes from the API to the server, where the data is actually located. So the server processes your request and then sends the response back to your app, whether on the laptop or on your phone even, and that usually comes in the shape of a JSON or XML file. So that might sound a little bit complex and a little bit abstract, but if you think about it, we're using APIs in our everyday life almost every hour. For example, if you think about Google Maps API, you can look at the maps on your phone and understand maybe where the nearest shops located, or maybe where the nearest cycling station is located. It's also about the weather apps. It's also using APIs. Also, a good example here is Amazon buttons, for example, that you can just press the button and it sends the correctly formulated requests to the server of Amazon saying that the user with this ID requested this product with that ID, and they wanted to be delivered to a certain address that's located, that is saved in the database of Amazon. So that's a very, very basic example of an API. You don't really need to think about how it does it in the backend. As long as you send the request in the correct form, that will be absolutely fine, and you should get the correct response. So as I mentioned, the response comes in the shape of JSON or XML files. And this is an example of a JSON file, because we are going to work with the API that sends us the response in the JSON format. So just to explain a little bit, XML is extensible markup language, and JSON is JavaScript object notation. So as I said, we're going to work with the JSON response. And as you can see in the image on the right, the JSON response usually comes in the shape of name and value pairs. So for example, in this case, we have a response about some orders, and we can see that it's also coming as a nested data. So for example, the first level we can see here is our orders. And then we can have many, many orders in this level. And then we can see individual orders in this big group of orders. And we have order number something, and then the date, and then the tracking number, and then the customer who placed this order. And then the next level is going to be about our customer. So we can see our customer ID, their name, their address, and so on and so forth. So you can see that, for example, if we look at our customer, we get our name part, say it's an address, and then the value for this name part is our actual address of this customer. So that's just a quick introduction of how how the JSON response is going to be structured. So we now understand what APIs are and how we get the response, what kind of shape it comes in. So now let's look at how we can connect to APIs in Tableau Prep. So there should be three parts coming together in order for you to be able to connect to APIs directly from Tableau Prep. So the first part is going to be the Python script. So Python script allows you to specify how and which API you want to connect to, any other maybe requests related to this API, then how you want to process this data, and then specify how you want to output this data to Tableau Prep. So this talk going to be focusing on Python, but you can also connect to APIs or do some extension of Tableau Prep functionalities using R language. So that's a separate branch of scripting capabilities in Tableau Prep. So we are talking here about Python. So imagine we have our Python script, which holds the logic of which API we're going to connect to and what data we want to get out of this API. Next, we would need to install and launch TabPy server. So this is a framework that allows Tableau Prep to talk to the Python, to our Python script, and actually run it and take the data that comes out as an output of our Python script. So in this case, we're going to get data from API. So once you have your Python script, then install and launch the TabPy server. You can bring them together in Tableau Prep using the script step. So you add the script step in your Tableau Prep flow, point to the Python script you wrote, launch the TabPy server, and then it's going to bring the data from the API directly in your flow. So I'm sure you're all excited about thinking of the different APIs that will connect in Tableau Prep. So let's see the practical demo, how you actually can do it. And imagine the situation when you have online shops, and some of them trade in the UK, and they have sales values coming in pounds, in currency of GBP, but some of them are trading in Europe, and the values of sales are coming in Euro. But you are, your headquarters are in London, for example, and you want to consolidate all your sales data to be coming in GBP. So you want to analyze it in one currency to make it very consistent. So we are going to look at how to speed up this process in Tableau Prep, connecting to foreign exchange rates API. So we will look how we can get exchange rates current or historical ones directly into Tableau Prep from this API. So this API is located at this address, exchangeratesAPI.io. And we are going to now quickly look at the steps we're going to take to get data from there. And for this exercise, just to make it a little bit simpler, so we are going to get historical rates for exchange from euro to pounds for the period of October 2020. So let's see at the steps we need to take to do that. So first, we would need to read the API's documentation and understand how it works and how we can send our request. Then based on that, we're going to formulate our URL that will allow us to connect to this API and request the data we actually want. Then we need to write our Python script, and we will need to include the URL we get in step number 2 into the script. And don't worry, I will show you the script now, but this is all available also to download from the GitHub, from the separate repository I set up. And I'm sure that we will send links after this talk. Then step number 4, once you have all these things in place, when you have your script in place, you can install and launch TabPy server. So Tableau is able to communicate with your Python script. And then we're going to connect Tableau Prep and TabPy server and add the script step in the flow so we can get this data directly into our flow and use it in our analysis to convert the euro to pounds. So this is a little bit a quick overview of how we can do it. So now let's go and see how we can actually go to do it in practice. So the first step, as you remember, is to look at the documentation for the API. And this API is quite simple, so I specifically chose it for this demo because it's quite straightforward. It's an open API. You don't need to get a password or any kind of token. There is no limit on the number of requests you can send. And the documentation really takes up only 1 page. So you can see it's very, very short. And if we look at the documentation, so the first thing we notice here, we see that the base currency here for this API is euro by default, so which is great. We actually want to exchange euros to pounds. We're going to be happy with that. Then we wanted to get the historical exchange rate. So if I go to the very top, you can see that with this API by default, you get you might get the latest foreign exchange rates. I don't really need the latest one. I want the historical one. So if I go further down, I can see that I have this structure for my URL. If I need to get historical rates, so I need to say history after the URL of the API, and then set the start and the end of my period. So in our case, it will be 1st of October of 2020 to 31st of October 2020. And you remember we wanted to get exchange rates only for GBPs. We're not interested in any other currencies. So if I'm not specifying the exchange rate in this API, it just gives me the list of all available ones. But if I see at this option, I actually understand that I can focus my request specifically on a certain currency. And if I look at how to do that, so I need to just say symbols equals and then GBP. So that's how we can understand how to work with the API's documentation. And sometimes it's really, really complex. This one, surprisingly, very, very straightforward. So once we understand this, once we think about, okay, all these parts we need to add to our URL, we can form our URL. And you can see this is the script. This is the Python script I wrote. And you can see that I'm including this URL with the mentioning of historical reference for historical rates, the period I want to get rates for, and then the currency I want to get the rates for. And then I will send this request using this Python script to the API. And you can see this code is starts as usually Python scripts should start with importing of certain libraries that we're going to use. And to connect to APIs from Tableau Prep and get the data out in the shape of a table that Tableau Prep will understand, you will need to import at least these 2 libraries. So the libraries that's called requests allows you to connect to APIs and send this request and get the data from it. But then the library is called pandas. That's used to manipulate data that you get in tabular format. So as I mentioned earlier, when we connect to APIs, we get the response in the shape of a JSON file. So you can see in line number 9 and 9, 10, and 11, I am getting this response after I send in this URL to the API, and then I'm converting this JSON response into a pandas data frame. So it's just a table that Tableau Prep will understand. I understand this might sound a little bit too abstract when you look at these lines of code. So I want just to show you how the data that's coming in looks like and how I transform it in this code. So as you can see, this is the Jupyter notebook I will use to show you in practice how this data comes in. So once we import the libraries, once we send the URL, and this is how our data will come in the JSON format. So you can see that we have the same structure with name and key values, value keys. So you can see that we get rate, we can get each date of our period, and then we have in each date of our period, we get the currency we're getting the exchange rate and the actual exchange rate. And then we're also told at the end the start and end of our period, and then the base currency. So it is euro in this case. And so this is how the data comes in, but Tableau Prep will not understand it because it's a JSON file. At the moment, I don't think that it's connecting to JSON files, so it won't understand the format. So we need to turn it into pandas data frame, as I mentioned, and that's what I'm doing further in my script, changing the shape of this table, changing the names of these columns just to make them a little bit easier to understand. So if I run all these further lines, that's how I will get the table at the end. So you see, it comes in much nicer format that even us, even we can understand very easily, and even more so, Tableau Prep will be very happy to get this very nice and clean table. So that's how the code will operate and how it will process our data to bring it into the pandas data frame shape for Tableau Prep. And the last thing here I want to draw your attention to is this part from the line 25 to 30. And this is the function that we create that's called get_output_schema. And this is a major part of your code when you run it to use in Tableau Prep. This is when you tell the Python how it needs to bring the table, what kind of columns it should have, and what data types this column should have to be able to bring it through into your Tableau Prep. And the name of these functions, get_output_schema, and how you specify the data types for each of these fields, it's actually specified in Tableau Prep documentation. So you can see that in the article about using Python scripts in your flow, there is this table telling you how you need to specify different data types. Make sure that you're bringing your dates, though, as strings, because that frequently is not going along the lines with what Tableau Prep expects. So you can see here, for example, and you might get this question as well when you look at this code, you're bringing the date field, but it's coming out as a string. For some reason, and it's also written in documentation, that dates and date time fields should be returned as valid strings. So just make sure that you are keeping this in mind. And the last bit here about this get_output_schema, this function where I'm telling what columns I want to have and what data types they will have. This is the main part you need to include if the structure of your output data, of your output table, is different from the structure that's coming in before you using the script step. If it is exactly the same, if you have 5 columns that are exactly the same, of the same data types, and they're going to be on the other side of the script file, exactly the script steps, or exactly the same, then you don't need to include this function in your script. But I wanted to show you how actually you can write this, this part of the script. The last bit here in the code I want to show you before we move on is that the whole logic of our connection to the API and manipulating our data to bring it in the nice tabular format is also written as a function. So this is the function. In my case, it's get_exchange_rates. That's the function that I'm going to refer to in Tableau Prep to tell it this is the function I want to write in this Python script. So let's just remember that it's called get_exchange_rates. So this is my code. It's not that long, but it allows us to do really cool stuff to bring data from API directly into our flow. So where we were, we read the API documentation, we got the URL code, we have our script. So now we need to install and launch TabPy server. So I have already installed the TabPy server on my local machine. You can obviously install it on use it on Tableau server, so starting from version 2019.3, and you can install it on a separate server and then it will run all the time. In my case, since it's on the local machine, I actually have to launch it before I need to use it in Tableau Prep. So I run it on my computer. I have my Python installed already, but if you do need to install Tableau server, you can find more information in Tableau's documentation on TabPy, and it can be quite easy. You just need to put pip install TabPy in your command line. But I'm not going to go into these details because it really depends on how and where you're going to use this framework. So I have everything installed. I can just start running my server. So I need to launch my server before I need to use it in Tableau Prep. So to do that, I need to open the so-called Anaconda prompt. That's part of the Anaconda environment that allows you to manage libraries and instances of Python. And to launch my TabPy server, it's very easy. I just need to type TabPy in this Anaconda prompt and press enter. And you see, I didn't even manage to blink. I can see that my server is already up and running. And how can I see that? The very last line in this response from the server says that the web service listening on port 9004. That tells me that my server is up and running and ready to be used in Tableau Prep in our case. So we have this step also out of the way. Now let's go back to Tableau Prep and see how we can use it there. So this is my very, very simple Tableau Prep flow. And I'm connected here to a dummy input, as you can see. Very simple data set. It's actually, if I click on the clean step, so you can see it's actually nothing similar to what I'm going to get out of the API. It's just a simple column input and numbers. So you might ask, why do you need to do that? As I mentioned, we can't directly connect to APIs from Tableau Prep, but you have to have an input step when you build your flow. So in my case, I'm not using the data that's already in the flow. I'm bringing new data from the API. So I need to create an input step with a dummy data. It can be even one line. It doesn't really matter. You can create it in the same structure as your output table, so that you don't need to write the get output schema function in your code. But I just wanted to show you that you don't even need to do that. You can have a very, very simple input and still get the data you want from the API. So this is my input. Let's now go into the help section at the top of your screen. And that's where you go and tell Tableau Prep where and how to connect to TabPy server so it can communicate with your Python script. So we go to help, settings and performance, manage analytic extensions connection. And here, as I mentioned earlier, since you can connect to use R and Python scripts, you can choose whether you connect it to RServe. This is the server for R, or you can connect to TabPy. This is our server, so I'm selecting that. And you can see as I'm running this server on my local machine, the server here is called localhost, which is fine. And the port, this is the port you remember that we got as a response when we ran our, when we started our server in the prompt. Oops, sorry. Let me just make it. Yeah, so this is the response, the success response we got that told us that the port is 9004. And this is a default port that your TabPy server will run on unless you change it, unless it's different for your installation. If you are using running TabPy server on some kind of server where you need to input username and password, obviously do that here. I don't need to do that here, so sorry. So we have TabPy server here selected, the port, the server name, which is very good. So I click sign in. And now I need to add my script step. So I press plus next to my clean step and select script. And now it's throwing some kind of error because I haven't set it up yet. So let's see how we can set it up. So on the left side in the settings, you can see that we can again still choose between RServe and Tableau Python. I'm going for TabPy. Then I'm going to select the file that I want to use. So this is going to be my Python script. So I click Browse, and I'm going to select this exchange rates API.py. Very good. And then the last bit here, we need to include our function name. And this is what I was saying when I was looking at the code. This is the function name that I created, and that has all my logic on how to connect to APIs and format the data and export it from the API. So that will be my get exchange rates. So let me put this here. And now if I click on my script file, the error is gone and we get the result we expected. Let me make it just a little bit bigger so we can see now all our dates from the 1st to the 31st of October and the corresponding exchange rate. So this is going to be euros to pounds. So you see it's maybe a little bit more work in terms of preparation, but once you use the script in Tableau Prep, it's actually quite nice and easy, and it brings all the data immediately. And if I go back, for example, and change in my script the period I want to bring the data from, that will be updated automatically in my Tableau Prep. So this is how you can connect to APIs directly from Data Prep using Python. If you want to learn more about integrating Tableau Prep and Python, I would recommend looking at the articles on Tableau's website, how to use Python scripts and prep flows. You can also read more about TabPy, and there is a documentation by Tableau on GitHub. Feel free to practice with public APIs to try and understand how APIs work and just get familiar with them. I would also highly recommend to watch Jack Perry's video on how to integrate TabPy and Tableau Prep Conductor. That's what Jenny mentioned. So the add-on that allows you to automate and run flows directly on your Tableau server. And then the last bit I want to mention as well, if you are interested in learning more about not only integrating Tableau Prep and Python, but just how it works in the backend, how you can extend your Tableau, I would encourage you to join Tableau Developer Program using this link on the screen, tableau.com/developer, and you can get access to a lot of different materials and the supportive community as well. So this is everything from me. Lorna, do you have any questions in the chat?
Brilliant. Thank you, Anya. That was great to see it in action. There's two questions. The first one is, will you post or share the Python script file of reading JSON as an example?
Yeah, I can share it even in the chat now, or we can post it once the event is finished. Yeah.
Post event, I'll update the links at the bottom of the YouTube video and it'll be in there for you. One question as well is, should it always be Python functions that goes into a Tableau script, or any pandas script would work? The reason I ask is Prep is asking for a function name, right?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it has to be pandas data frame. That's one thing. And it has to be also a function, because you need to put the function in Tableau Prep I'm showing it on my screen, and I've forgotten that I stopped sharing.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that was all the questions that we have. But if
Okay.
there is any other questions in the chat, we'll stick around for a couple more minutes, just because I know there's a lag between YouTube and the live stream that we're doing. So if everybody could switch on their cameras. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody is still awake. Oh, what happened to Tom? Oh, there he is. Thank you, everyone, for doing this session for us. I really hope it was useful for our audience. If you do have any further questions for us, please just let us know. Either comment on the YouTube video itself or drop us an email at info@theinformationlab.co.uk and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But that is it from us, and there is no further questions in the chat. So thank you everyone for joining in, and that is the end of our stream today. Don't forget to buy Carl's book, Tableau Prep Up and Running, if you want a little bit more about Tableau Prep. Here at the Information Lab, we are also running some Tableau Prep videos on Tuesdays lunchtimes for the next 4 weeks, courtesy of Tom and Jenny. They have done a lot of videos for you. So if you want to up your game with Tableau Prep, do tune into them tomorrow and you'll have a playlist by the end of the month to get you on your way with Tableau Prep. So without further ado, goodbye everyone and see you all soon.
Thanks everyone.